and somehow even dandruff would disappear? I don't know how this makes sense. I'm so confused. My name is Dani, and today I'm going to be looking at all the books that I read in the year of 2021, including the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between, so let's get into it. So let's get an overview of my reading year in 2021. So I just recently joined the Storygraph. I imported all of my data from Goodreads there, so now I can go look at my stats very easily, which is super cool. I don't have to do my own spreadsheet or anything. Storygraph just does it for you. I'll be looking at my phone for my stats. I read 13 books, which totaled about 3,966 pages. The three most common moods that I tended to read were tense, informative, and dark, so that's fun. 46% of the books that I read were a medium pace, 31% were fast, and 23% were slow. The majority of books that I read were under 300 pages, which was 54%, and then 46% were 300 to 499 pages. And the most common genre that I read was young adult, and business coming in at number 2, contemporary coming in at number 3. And my average rating for this year was 3.23 stars. The most common rating I gave was 4.0 stars. So there's an overview of my reading year for 2021. So let's go into detail on some of the books that I read this year. The first book that I read this year was Broke Millennial Takes on Investing by Erin Lowry. I just kind of wanted to learn a bit more about investing because I was thinking about maybe getting involved in it myself, so I just wanted to read that book. It's a pretty good, informative book, a very good basic understanding of investing, some terms that are commonly used, and stuff like that. Later in the year, I read the first book in the Broke Millennial series, which is called Broke Millennial, Stop Scraping By and Get Your Financial Life Together, and both of those books I rated 4 stars. So my reading year in 2021 started off pretty good. I was trying to learn more about financial stuff so I could get my own finances together. However, that went downhill because the second book that I read in 2021 was quite the doozy, and that lovely book was The War of Art by Steven Pressfield. My professor, who was advising me during my senior capstone film production, advised us to all pick this book up, and I really respect this professor, so I had high hopes going into this book. And then I also read the foreword by Robert McKee, who is a very well-regarded screenwriter, so I was like, alright, this is probably going to be pretty good. And then I was let down pretty hard as soon as I read the introduction by Steven Pressfield. Oh my god, it was so bad. I really did not enjoy this book whatsoever, and I also found it did not give very much helpful advice whatsoever. The premise of this book can be summarized in 2 very simple sentences. Procrastination is the evil force which all creatives must face. If you want to be a professional creative, you just have to suck it up and do the work no matter what it takes. This book is just insufferable and contradictory and condescending to you as you're reading the whole thing, and there are incredibly outdated ideas about mental illness and mental health, and I really did not appreciate that. And I think to really drive my point home, I'm just going to read you a few patches from this book, and then we will move on. So this is on the introduction part called The Unlived Life. If tomorrow morning, by some stroke of magic, every dazed and benign soul woke up with the power to take the first step towards pursuing his or her dreams, every shrink in the directory would be out of business. Prisons would stand empty. The alcohol and tobacco industries would collapse, along with the junk food, cosmetic surgery, and infotainment business, not to mention pharmaceutical companies, hospitals, and the medical profession from top to bottom. Domestic abuse would become extinct, as would addiction, obesity, migraine headaches, road rage, and dandruff. I don't know how, if everyone chose to follow their dreams, that would somehow make all of these horrible things in the world disappear, and also somehow hospitals would disappear, somehow domestic abuse, and somehow even dandruff would disappear. I don't know how this makes sense. I'm so confused. Anyway, here's another quote from the same section, literally on the next page. Call it overstatement, but I'll say it anyway. It was easier for Hitler to start World War II than it was for him to face a blank square of canvas. I think the author is forgetting a huge swath of things that happened and led to the many atrocities that happened in World War II, and I think that Hitler not being able to be a successful artist was exactly one of them, and neither was it, like, the worst one. Oh my god. Continuing. This next quote just completely disregards any sort of true science and any knowledge that we know of mental illnesses, about their severity and how they really can impact people's daily lives. So here we go. Attention deficit disorder, seasonal affect disorder, social anxiety disorder. These aren't diseases, they're marketing ploys. Sir, I don't know if I see you have a degree in human psychology, but this book was published in 2002. Now, I was only 2 in 2002, so I don't know exactly like what the medical consensus was for a lot of these genuine mental health disorders, but I don't think it was what Pressfield just said. So please correct me if I'm wrong, but reading this in the year of 2021, that was a very, very outdated view of mental illness, and that just made me incredibly angry. And overall in this book, Pressfield makes a lot of claims but never cites some of these claims, so I have no idea where a lot of these claims are coming from. So, for example, on the next page, it says, doctors estimate that 70 to 80% of their business is non-health related, so I don't know where that is coming from. Not a clue, don't know what doctors he talked to. I don't know. This next quote is incredibly frustrating and incredibly dismissive of the hardships of pregnancy. What's particularly insidious about the rationalizations that resistance presents to us is that a lot of them are true. They're legitimate. Our wife may really be in her 8th month of pregnancy. She may in truth need us at home. Our department may really be instituting a changeover that will eat up hours of our time. Indeed, it may make sense to put off finishing our dissertation at least till after the baby's born. What resistance leaves out, of course, is that all this means diddly. Tolstoy had 13 kids and wrote War and Peace. Sir, was Tolstoy the one that was pregnant? Was he the one that carried those 13 kids to term? I don't think so. And she probably needed help with those 13 kids, so I'm just... okay, and this final quote I'm going to read is a complete misinterpretation of how cancer starts. Is it possible, Tom Laughlin asks, that the disease of self evolved as a consequence of actions taken or not taken in our lives? Could our unlived lives have exacted their vengeance upon us in the form of cancer? And if they did, can we cure ourselves now by living these lives out? This is again another disgusting, outdated idea of illness. This idea reminds me of something that was common in like very early Christianity, especially with people that had leprosy, where people thought that people with leprosy had brought it upon themselves. So therefore, this is a very, very outdated idea and does not follow modern medicine whatsoever. So apparently if you don't follow your dreams, this guy says you're gonna bring illness upon yourself, which could even be cancer. Yay. So in conclusion, I would not recommend this book to anyone who is looking to inspire their creative potential. It is just bad. You've heard the advice before. There are better books out there, and this is not a good one, so bye. Since we're on the topic of advice books for creatives, I also read Hollywood Drive by Eve Light-Hontaner. Everyone in my senior capstone production class was required to read this book, and the author is actually a credited production coordinator on the film Titanic, among many other films on her IMDb. So I found this book, especially in comparison to The War of Art, much more helpful, especially if you are looking to go into the film industry, especially as a woman looking to go into the film industry. I found all of the author's advice to be incredibly helpful. I have so many highlights throughout this book. It was very, very helpful. If you are looking to go into the film industry, I would 100% recommend you pick this book up because it is definitely very, very helpful. It gives you advice on all the different roles that you could have in the film industry because there's so much more than just the typical things that most people think of, like director, cinematographer, producer. There is so many other roles that you can do, and there's advice on how to get into the film industry, how to write your resume, all that kind of stuff. Very practical, helpful advice, and this is a much, much better book if you're looking for advice on that. So now we're getting into some of my favorite fictional books that I read this year, and by far my favorite fictional book that I read last year was An Ember in the Ashes by Saba Tahir. This book is so good. Like, if you haven't picked up the Ember in the Ashes series, you absolutely should. I have yet to pick up the second book, A Torch Against the Night, but I'm definitely going to get to it this year because I loved An Ember in the Ashes so much. This book gave me the same kind of feelings that I had when I was reading The Hunger Games, although this book is definitely not like The Hunger Games. It had the same sort of depth in character and world building, and just everything about the story is so well executed, well written. It's just amazing, and you really, really should check it out. This This book is told from two perspectives, one from Elia and one from Ilias. When we first meet with Elia, her brother is being arrested for treason, and she has to find a way to get him out, so she has to become a slave. And Ilias is in a much higher rank in this society, and he is currently trained to be a mask, and a mask is essentially a very highly trained soldier, one of the most respected and feared people in the Martial Empire. However, secretly, Ilias really does not want to become a mask. However, there is a competition to determine which of the masks will become the next emperor. So you see the two of their stories intertwine, and I love seeing both of their perspectives. Both of them are really well done. There are some other really interesting characters in this world, and I cannot wait to see what happens next. So I would highly recommend checking this book out, and all of the books in the series are currently out if you wanted to binge read them, and I will be continuing reading this series this year, and I will let you know how that goes. Going off of the theme of books that I really enjoyed this year, another book that I really enjoyed was Burn Our Bodies Down by Rory Power. This book is about a girl named Margot who really has no information about her family at all. Her mother refuses to tell her anything until one day she finds a little snippet of a hint of her past family, and she goes to investigate and meet her grandmother. And that sets her on a journey to learn a lot more about her family than she initially bargained for. I picked this book up for the Summerween Readathon this year over the summer, and I vlogged that, so you can check that up above. And this book really surprised me. I came across this book when I was looking at Bookish Realm's Goodreads page when I was trying to figure out books that I wanted to read for the readathon, and I came across this one, and she had a glowing review of it, so I was like, alright, let me go check it out. And I was definitely not disappointed when I read this book. I wasn't sure what to expect with this book, and I didn't really know much about it other than what I just told you about it. And that is the way that I would recommend going into this book, not knowing much more than that very basic premise I just gave you, because this book is full of surprises. It has an amazing twist at the end that I was not expecting whatsoever. It's such an interesting concept too once you read that twist and that reveal. Super interesting, was not expecting it. It's amazing. This book is really well written. This book is very good at exploring the theme of generational trauma. I would just go into this book not knowing much more than I told you about it earlier, and if it sounds like something you'd be interested in, I would recommend you check it out. Another book that I read during the Summerween Readathon was Horrid by Katrina Lino. I have read one of Katrina Lino's other books. I believe it's called Everything All at Once. I really enjoyed that, so I thought I was going to really enjoy Horrid, although the two books are different genres. Everything All at Once is a contemporary, and this is a horror novel. I don't think this one was as good as Everything All at Once. I definitely liked it, I just didn't like it as much as her other work. This book is about a girl who moves all the way across the country from California to Maine, and she has to live with her mother in an old house that belonged to their grandmother, and it's kind of a creepy house, and creepy things keep happening. I also thought this kind of had an odd concept to it that I don't think I fully grasped even when I finished this book, and after reflecting on it, I don't even really think I completely understood the concept at hand, but it was an enjoyable enough read. It's just not my favorite that I read this year. So it definitely is good for giving a bit of that creepy, like, horror house kind of vibe. So if you enjoy that, you maybe enjoy this book more than I did. Another book that I read this year was Grown by Tiffany D. Jackson. This is the first book I've ever read by Tiffany D. Jackson. I picked this book up the day after I got my flu shot in October this year because I wasn't feeling super great after it. And I just picked this up because I wanted something to do that wasn't looking at my laptop, and I finished it in one sitting. So this flew by super quickly for me. This book actually does, when you open it up, it does have some content warnings. So those content warnings are mentions of sexual abuse, rape, assault, child abuse, kidnapping, and addiction to opioids. So if you are sensitive to any of those topics, I would definitely take that into account before picking this book up. I think this book tackles all of those topics very well. However, they are very, very prevalent in this book. So definitely just be warned of that. I did fly through this book. I'm not sure if I could really say I enjoyed it just because of how serious the topics were, and I found that after I read this book I kind of had to take a break from like thinking about it, and I couldn't really pick up another book for a little bit after digesting this one, but I thought it was overall well done, and I'm looking forward to reading more of Tiffany D. Jackson's other work. I actually have White Smoke on my Kindle already, so I'm gonna probably pick that up at some point. I picked up two classics this year. One is The Great Gatsby by F. Scott Fitzgerald. If you have been keeping up with my progress on my screenplay, you'll know that my screenplay is in inspired by The Great Gatsby, so I wanted to go back and read the source material before I went too far into my screenplay, so that's why I read this book. I definitely enjoyed it a little bit more than when I first read it in high school. I had a bit more appreciation for the language. I just have a bit more of a critical lens that I can use to look at literature with, so I definitely enjoyed it from a much more critical perspective this time around. And it's in the public domain, so it's giving me some good inspiration for what I want to do with my screenplay. The other classic that I read this year was The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde. This I had to pick up for a class, so I definitely don't think I got to enjoy this as much as I wish I did, so I may reread it at some point. Also, when I picked this book up, I was incredibly stressed doing my senior capstone film, so that was where most of my energy was going, so I didn't have much energy to put into this book. So I didn't really enjoy it. There were some things that just kind of, I think, went over my head just because, you know, I'm not exactly the smartest person in the world. Because I know there are LGBTQIA themes in this book, but I don't think I really picked up on that, and that I think was probably a language thing just because, you know, they couldn't really just outright say gay back when this was written. So I think I would just have to reread this again, look at it from a more critical lens, just take more time with it probably when I would read it. That's what I've noticed when I've had to read classics. Whenever I read them for school, I feel like I missed a bunch of things just because I read them too quickly. So I think I definitely need to take some more time with this to be able to really appreciate it and absorb myself into the story. And now I have another book that I had to read for school, but which was unfortunately very disappointing for me, and that is Normal People by Sally Rooney. So I took an Irish studies class last spring, and my professor really loved this book. She's Irish herself, she really likes Sally Rooney. I know a lot of other people here on BookTube and Book Twitter really love Sally Rooney's books. However, I just didn't love this one. I just didn't vibe with this book. I don't think it's for me, so unfortunately it's really one of the most disappointing books that I read this year because I had high expectations for me to like it. I know when I first picked this book up, the thing that was very jarring for me was the fact that Sally Rooney does not use any quotation marks to indicate that people are speaking, so I'm not exactly sure how that was supposed to be used to benefit the story because I just didn't get it, and frankly it was just frustrating for me to read when I first started it because I was trying to figure out, alright, who is speaking and when are they speaking and what's happening here. So it took me a bit to get used to that, but then I did as I read more of the story. However, to me there just wasn't much that happened in the story. One of my favorite things is that the main guy character goes to therapy, so I really liked seeing that and seeing his experience with depression and anxiety. I liked seeing that, but I don't think that was enough for me to really enjoy a lot of the other elements of this book. It just wasn't for me, and I was kind of disappointed that I didn't enjoy it as much as a lot of other people do. And to wrap up this video, I just read like 3 more nonfiction books, one of which was Built to Sell, which I read for my internship because we were looking at ways to improve parts of our process. So this was recommended to me to read by my supervisor, so I read it. It was okay, just like 3 stars. I don't really read that many business books. It is what it is. I found a few useful concepts from the book that I used for a project that I was working on, and that's that. And the last 2 books I have are Save the Cat by Blake Snyder and Save the Cat Writes for TV by Jamie Nash. And these are both very good books about screenwriting. This one in particular I think is very good if you're looking to write a screenplay for film, and this is much more helpful if you're trying to plan a TV series. Both books are very helpful in outlining Blake Snyder's beat sheet and how he breaks down genre and stuff, and I found them very, very helpful in terms of writing my own screenplay. So I would recommend both of these books if you are looking to write your own screenplay. And that, guys, is all of the books that I read in the year of 2021. Let me know what some of your favorite books that you read this year in the comments down below. I will leave all my social media links down below as well, and I will just see you guys all later. Bye!